Thank you for joining us today for the final history forum of the 2021 season for the original Wasco County Courthouse. We hope you've enjoyed the season and will enjoy this program.
Get ready! Get set! Go!
Most people leave the credits to the end of the program. I like to honor people up front because they made the program possible. Special thanks to Susan Buse, who helped locate many of the pictures at the Discovery Center and Wasco County Historical Museum. Thanks to Linda Wilson, who wrote a history of electricity in the county, which I borrowed from extensively. Special thanks to Sean Bailey of the Wasco County Clerk's Office, who helped me dig up voter records from 45 years ago. And always and forever to my sweet wife, Julie Reynolds. And now, let the show begin. Electricity first came to the Dalles in July 1888. So today, we're just a few months short of 135 years of electric power in Wasco County. The Dalles Electric Light Company built a wood-burning steam power generation plant at 7th and Union Streets. Unfortunately, we don't have any photos of that. But the wood to feed the boilers of the little steam plant was obtained from scows on the banks of the Columbia River. Enterprising sorts would cut wood near Cascade Locks and Stevenson, then sail upriver to the Dalles, where they did a brisk trade with both steamboats and the power plant. Another source was from the Johns Lumber Mill flume at 14th and Mount Hood Streets. The actual sawmill was located near the confluence of the South Fork of Mill Creek and Crow Creek, and the flume was 16 miles long. In fact, in the background of this picture, you can see a guardhouse left over from old Fort Dalles. That power plant was sold to the Dalles Electric Telephone and Power Company in 1892. An announcement in the May 3, 1893 Chronicle said a new plant will be built on the northwest corner of 1st and Laughlin Streets. Here's a photo that most of us have seen on historical calendars and whatnot that depicts that plant. The Chronicle article described an 80 by 50 foot building with an additional 28 by 44 foot boiler room. That's where the wood fire heated the water in the boiler, which made the steam to run the generator. The article said the engine would have 243 horsepower and a flywheel 15 feet in diameter. And it was said also, it will then be the best plant on the Pacific coast for its size and can supply any demands made on it, even for a city double our population, which at the time was 3,542. So who were the people involved in this? On the left, Daniel M. French, president of the Dalles Electric Telephone and Power Company. He's also the head of French and Company Bankers. Also president of the Gilman French Land and Livestock Company and president of Arlington Bank as well. On the right is William H. Biggs, also on the Power Company board. He is the organization's secretary and also a director of the Wasco Warehouse Company and Gilman French. And yes, Biggs Junction is named after this guy. Love the beard. Here's an interior of the company showing at left manager Hugh Glenn, an unidentified gentleman, then in the far back a fellow named George Rutch, and at the table the bookkeeper identified only as a Mr. McGovern. In 1901, Wasco Warehouse and Milling Company is formed, and in 1902 they buy both Wasco Warehouse, which had been formed in 1883 to ship wool and other products out of the country, and the Electric Company. They built this mill to grind grain grown in the region, and they had ambitious plans. No longer satisfied with a wood-burning plant, they wanted to harvest the power of a river, and so they went to the White River, just below the two falls not far from Ty Valley. It was a large undertaking, not only constructing the power plant in the canyon, but 27 miles of lines and poles needed to bring the power to the Dalles. Cost was $100,000 in gold dollars, equivalent to $30 million today, given inflation over the years. Customers in the Dalles and Dufur were given a 30-day free trial. The plant provided electricity for customers to operate up to 10 10-watt globes each evening for a month for $1.60. The electricity was shut off in the daytime. A highly complimentary article that appeared in the Oregon Daily Journal on February 4, 1903 about the completion of the plant said, "The machinery is of the latest models. It conducts the electricity under high voltage, stepping it down at the substation here before it is delivered to the customer." The journal reports the line from White River to the Dalles is more than twice as long as the one from Oregon City to Portland, yet has half the transmission losses. We mentioned the plant is located below the second of two falls in the White River. At the head of the falls, there is a concrete dam. This is what it looks like in the present day. And the water is carried in a 54-inch diameter, 120-foot-long wooden pipe, giving a fall of 119 feet to the water wheel pit, where there are 3 water wheels which power generators. Here's an interior shot there. The story also noted that the switchboard is of blue Vermont marble. Can't quite see that from here, though. And the writer also waxed enthusiastic about the early hydro project, saying, quote, "The Dalles has the best electric lights in Oregon as far as this writer knows. They are brilliant and never fail for a moment on account of low water. The feature of the water power is that it never fails. It runs alike winter and summer with power to spare for all the industries of the Dalles." The plant, by the way, provided power for half a century before ceasing operations in 1960. Here is a couple of shots of the more recent. This was done in the late 1990s. This is the exterior, and here is the interior. Now, having expended all of this money to construct the plant, they worked on getting customers. They need to pay off those loans. Those of you who attended last week's History Forum with my wife, Julie Ruggles, will recognize this as George Vouse of the Dalles, who recorded events in the Dalles in the early days of the 20th century. One of those events took place January 11th, 1904. His diary entry for that date refers to a demonstration by the Wasco Warehouse Milling Company to interest the Dalles people in the blessings of electricity. Here's what he said about it. "The only part of the show I remember was when Ella McCoy, as a sort of climax to the affair, had to shuffle down the stage of the Vote Opera House, placing her feet on electrified discs on the floor. These connected with metal discs on the soles of her shoes, which, through wires running up her legs and sides, lit an aurora effect of electric lights protruding from different parts of her anatomy, as well as the electric torch which she carried in her hand. She had been warned not to watch her feet, with a result that much of the time her progress from the back to the front of the stage was sort of a preview of what electric signs of the future were to be, as she flashed bewilderingly on and off when her feet failed to coincide with the discs in the floor." When the power from White River reached the Dalles, much of it went into the Wasco Warehouse Milling Company to a massive 200-horsepower electric motor purchased from Thomas Edison's company to run all the mill's equipment. Here's a photo I took some time back of Jim Martin by the generator. In 1908, Thomas Edison himself and his wife Mina and daughter Madeline visited the Dalles, spent the night at the Umatilla house. There's no record of whether he visited the motor at the milling company, but the family was taken for a drive in the orchards, and he told this to the Chronicle, "Oregon is going to be one of the finest and best states in the Union. It has not yet fully awakened to its possibilities. It is only beginning to take notice. The coming years, it's going to realize the possibilities in electrical ways never dreamed of, with a magnificent water power all over the state. Here at the Dalles, you have sufficient water power to do anything you may want to do with it." In 1910, the Wasco Warehouse Milling sells its electrical interests, including the White River Powerhouse, the lines to the Dalles, all the lines delivering power to the residents and businesses. And who did they sell it to? Pacific Power and Light, which was formed that year from a number of smaller struggling companies that were able to make it by combining their forces. And from 1910 to 1941, Pacific Power and Light was the sole provider of power to the Dalles and Dufur. And now this word from Ready Kilowatt.
I'm a real live wire and I never tire. Yes, sir, I'm a red hot shot. I can cook your meals, turn the factory wheels, 'cause I'm Ready Kilowatt. When you toast your toast or you roast your roast, it is I who makes them hot. I'm in your TV set with every show you get, 'cause I'm Ready Kilowatt. I'm the little man who's always there. I'm a powerful high voltage guy. I'm so full of spark I can light up the dark, and you should see me wink my electric eye. I wash and dry your clothes, play your radios, I can heat your coffee pot. I am always there with lots of power to spare, 'cause I'm Ready Kilowatt. Remember, just plug in. I'm ready.
Though the Wasco Warehouse Milling Company had sold all of its electrical interests in 1910, in July 31st, 1911, a fire, believed started by all things, faulty wiring at the plant, burns the place to the ground, along with the Great Southern Railway depot located just east of the warehouse where the Union Pacific yards are today, and several outbuildings. And it was rebuilt. Here's an elevation drawing as seen from the river, and the now familiar warehouse under construction. And here's a view of the plant in its early days, showing the White River Flour advertisement on the side of the building. Some of the equipment in those early days was considerably different. This was the horse-drawn equivalent of a lift bucket for linemen. We assumed that the horse would be unhooked from the wagon and the wheels blocked before a lineman climbed up that ladder. And one of the services they offered was most unusual. When I read this in the History Mystery feature in the Chronicle back in 2002, I got a nice letter from a gentleman named Max John, spelled Jahn. He wrote, "The gentleman on the right with his hand and arm on the barrel is my dad, Frank John," he wrote. "He was employed by Pacific Power and Light for approximately 40 years in the Dalles as line superintendent. And what the contraption did was hook onto the power lines overhead through a transformer and then be clipped to your pipes in the winter to unfreeze them. It must have been a fairly healthy occupation because the fellow wrote that his father passed away in March 1984 at the age of 105. He also identified the other fellow on the left as one Harry Rumsey. In the 1930s, residents began pushing to bring electricity to their homes and farms, and President Roosevelt created the REA on May 11, 1935, with an executive order. At that time, while cities had enjoyed electric power for many years, in 1935, quote, fewer than 11 of every 100 U.S. farms were receiving central station electric service. Main problem was the power companies were unwilling and or unable to string wires over long distances across farmland and backcountry at an affordable price. The Rural Electrification Act of 1936 added new REA policies based on the agency's early experience. From that point, loans would be available for both large construction projects, for example, power plants and power lines, and for individual homes. For example, wiring and appliances. Repayment could extend up to 25 years, and the interest rate would be kept low by tying it to federal government borrowing rates. Importantly, individuals would not be held personally liable for default on an REA loan. Also, the Bonneville Power Act of 1937 authorized construction of Bonneville and Grand Coulee dams on the Columbia River, bringing extremely low-cost electricity to the region. Public nonprofit utilities such as cities, co-ops, and public utility districts were given preferential rights to the power from the federal dams built in the Columbia Basin. And we have two parallel stories here, one for Northern Wasco County PUD, one for Wasco Electric Co-op. We'll start it here. The Granges in Wasco County began an effort to create a People's Utility District, but voters rejected a ballot measure in 1938. However, a second effort by a group of the Dalles businessmen called the Dalles Public Power and Industrial Club was approved by voters August 15, 1939. Here are the original board. Front row, William Seufert on the left, Charles Foster, and Roy Johnson, who happened to be Susan Buse's grandfather. The back row is Jess Ott and Cecil Byers. We're going to switch away from the PUD and look at the REA. Most of the farming community in Wasco County did not have electricity in 1940. Pacific Power and Light Company ran its power lines from town to town, but was very expensive for farms along the way to be hooked up. Eric Johnson, a rancher who lived near the Dalles, could see the power lines from his house, but he couldn't get service. He decided to meet with some of his neighbors to try to get electricity to all the farmers. They met for the first time on April 4, 1940, in the Duffer City Hall. They elected a board of incorporators who served as the first board of directors. By June of 1940, the farmers had hired an engineer to map out the system. In August, REA granted a loan to Wasco Electric Cooperative in the amount of $240,000 for the construction of 264 miles of line to 342 members. The first annual meeting held in October of 1940 at the Civic Auditorium. The directors elected at the meeting included W.E. Davis, who then served as president of the board. Eric Johnson was hired as superintendent. Construction began March 31, 1941. The members who would be able to use electricity helped the construction crew by clearing rights-of-way, digging holes, setting poles, etc. as a real cooperative effort. This photo is titled Installing Lines on the Hostetler Ranch. Not sure where that is, but that was from the archives. And on May 24, 1941, at the end of a week of celebration of Bonneville Power and Appliance Week, President Davis took a long stick and tipped the energizing switch at the substation amid cheers from the crowd gathered for the great moment. Wasco Electric Cooperative was the first utility to purchase power from Bonneville Power Administration in Wasco County. Since that time, the area served by Wasco Electric Cooperative has grown to over 5,000 square miles in 5 counties: Wasco, Sherman, Jefferson, Gillum, and Wheeler. More than 3,000 members with 1,685 miles of lines and 10 substations to serve them. Now back to the PUD. Despite the fact the PUD was voted into existence in 1939, it hadn't put in a single pole by the time Wasco Electric property was energizing, and it wouldn't for a full decade. That's because PP&L fought them at every step of the way. The private utility filed numerous lawsuits and local challenges to the PUD's efforts to gain a city franchise permit and to operate in the county. In fact, 3 cases went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court, the first one in 1943, but city officials in the Dalles refused to accept and file a petition requesting there be an initiative ordinance granting the utility district a 20-year franchise. That led to the PUD board filing a writ of mandamus against the city officials to compel them to file a petition and call an election. The city appealed to the Oregon Supreme Court, and the court upheld the writ, leading to election in 1946. Here's an ad that they ran in favor of it. And here it is granting the franchise. But not really. The voters may have approved the franchise, but that was not the end of the obstruction. PP&L filed a suit against the district selling revenue bonds to finance construction, and that went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court again, which ruled in favor of the PUD in 1948. The bonds were sold, and 2 years after the local voters approved the PUD's franchise, the city finally gave its approval. The first customers were served on April 7th, 1949. All right, story ends. Good to go? Not quite. The PUD had a franchise, but it did not have an exclusive franchise. Now, PP&L got its electricity from coal and gas-fired plants at a higher cost than the PUD because the PUD could buy much cheaper hydropower from Bonneville. It was assumed that once PUD got its lines in and citizens had a choice to save an estimated 15 to 20% on their bill, they'd naturally do the smart financial thing and switch to the lower-cost provider. Instead, however, PP&L appealed to the state's power commissioner, one George H. Flagg, to lower the rates to compete directly with the PUD. Though one thing about the situation, the PP&L was not allowed to raise the rates elsewhere to offset the lower rates in the Dalles. That would have to make up the losses from profits that would otherwise go to its stockholders. Well, the strategy almost worked. An article in the Salem Statesman Journal said that PUD in its first year had been running at a loss of $1,000 a month, and at one point was down to less than 200 customers and little reserves. An arrangement was made with Wasco Electric Cooperative to consolidate the office personnel and management of both entities. Interesting twist. In February 1950, the Bend Bulletin reported that 14 public power cooperatives and PUDs from Oregon and Washington, including Wasco Electric, Northern Wasco PUD, Klickitat PUD, and a bunch of others, made an effort to buy Pacific Power and Light. The PP&L common stock had just been acquired by an East Coast investors group for $16 million and some change. And when the new owners flew to Portland to see what they bought, they told reporters they hoped to sell PP&L at a profit within 6 to 9 months. Well, the consortium, which tentatively titled itself the Interstate Electric, Inc., offered the investors a chance to more than double their money with an offer of $34,400,000. Obviously, that didn't happen. We're not sure where the investors sold, but no doubt they got even more money out of the deal. Well, fortunately, by 1953, the PUD had turned the corner and was happily in the black. There's one more great electric power story that we haven't touched on yet, and most people don't think about that. But that work started in 1964 for the Pacific Northwest Pacific Southwest Intertie, the first high-voltage direct current transmission line to be constructed in the U.S. When it was energized in 1970, the 846-mile-long direct current portion of the line was heralded as the longest of its kind in the world. Here's a little clip from a BPA promotional film called Intertie.
2 of the lines are 500,000-volt alternating current lines, and 2 are 750,000-volt direct current lines. The Bonneville Power Administration, the Bureau of Reclamation, 4 private utilities, and the City of Los Angeles all are building portions of the project. Bonneville is building 3 lines and part of the 4th across central Oregon. They start where the power is generated at the Columbia River.
When I moved to the Dalles in 1974, as we mentioned before, PP&L lines would go up one side of a street, PUD lines on the other. Eventually, in 1976, PP&L agreed to sell its facilities in Wasco County, except those in Mosier, to Northern Wasco County PUD. Now, This is one of the slickest political tricks I've ever seen. In the month before the election, on a ballot measure for the PUD to buy those assets, PP&L sent out bills that took all those rate hikes that they had declined since 1949, 27 years worth of sticker shock, amounting to a 74% rate increase to PP&L ratepayers in the Dalles. Voters in the Dalles voted 73% yes in passing the bond. In Duffer, the vote was 95-1. Now, it took years for the PUD to gradually consolidate and remove those duplicate lines, but I think everybody here is fairly pleased that that did take place. And finally, in the 1990s, the PUD built 2 small hydroelectric power plants at the Dalles and McNairy dams to supplement its BPA power. These 2 hydroelectric projects are considered fish-friendly and generate clean, renewable, and carbon-free power. The first one was in June of 1991 when a 5-megawatt generation unit installed in the North Shore Fishway at the Dalles Dam began producing environmentally clean power. 38 million kilowatt hours the first year, and has continued to do so each year thereafter. The nice thing about it was accomplished without any cost to PUD customers through a power sales agreement. Puget Sound Power and Light agreed to buy the output for the first 21 years. The payments would cover the debt service. Then in 1997, a generator twice the size, or 10 megawatts, was completed at McNairy Dam, jointly owned with Klickitat PUD. Each of the utility receives 5 megawatts. And I just have to close on this. What's the story on the 2 nickels in that photograph? Well, both of them are sitting on the edge on top of the housing that holds the turbine at the Dalles. One of them was set on edge more than 3 decades ago. A second was added more recently after most of the original crew retired, and the new crew wanted representation of their own. So well balanced is the turbine that the nickels remain on their edge. They're a fitting symbol for the PUD itself, sturdy, dependable, and well balanced. Thank you for listening.
You can make your family's life much brighter. You will find your work much lighter. It's as easy as can be to live better electrically. You can have more time for fun and pleasure. Family moments you will treasure. It's an opportunity to live better electrically.